guys, it's Gretchen and welcome back to my channel. So I am really excited for today's video. Something that I've been wanting to do on this channel for a while is create videos that kind of give a comprehensive look at specific piercings. As you can see from the title of today's video, I am going to be discussing septum piercings. But what these videos are going to be is like a comprehensive guide to septum piercings. It's not going to be necessarily about my experience with a septum piercing. Obviously, that's going to play a little bit of a role just because my experience is the only thing that I have to go off of to offer any kind of advice. So instead of it just being about my experience, it's going to be about the septum piercing as a whole. So in the broad scheme of things, there are going to be four main components to these comprehensive guides. It's going to start off with what is a septum piercing? I'm going to tell you what exactly it is and what it entails. The second section is going to be about the procedure and the potential pain that you may experience while getting a septum piercing. The third is probably going to be the largest section, and that is going to entail healing and aftercare for your septum piercing. And the fourth section, which is what I think is the fun section, is all about your jewelry options. So like, what exactly can you wear in a septum piercing? So if you've been thinking about getting a septum piercing, maybe you'll stick around and watch this video for a comprehensive look at a septum piercing. So section number one, what is a septum piercing? So the septum refers to the cartilage that is right here in the center of your nose that separates your left and your right nostril. Now, the actual piercing does not go through the cartilage. So any of this down here is not where the piercing goes through. Up here at the tip top of your nose, right here at the tip, is this really tiny spot of flesh, basically. That's where the piercing goes. It gets pierced in the cartilage. That's technically not correct. It shouldn't be pierced there. So people refer to this area as the sweet spot. That's because it's just like this little fleshy area that makes it a whole lot easier to pierce. The thin piece of flesh, skin, what have you, sits right above the cartilage. So it is right here at the tip top, sits above the cartilage, but because it's right here in the center, that's why it's called a septum piercing. Something to keep in mind that I don't think a lot of people know about. Not everyone has a sweet spot, which is unfortunate if you want a septum piercing and then you go and find out that you don't actually have the sweet spot. This makes it incredibly difficult to perform the piercing because you're not supposed to pierce the cartilage. Sometimes it happens, so if you have something along the lines of like no sweet spot or even like a deviated septum where your septum cartilage is a little crooked, you may not be able to actually get this piercing done. So now that you know exactly what the septum piercing is, let's move on to the procedure of getting one done as well as the pain you may experience when getting one. When done correctly, this piercing should have very minimal pain. It should not hurt anywhere nearly as bad as, say, getting a cartilage piercing in your ears. That being said, keep in mind a needle is going through you. Even if you don't experience pain, there's gonna be some discomfort. Also, just based on having to get the needle up to this tip-top point right here is going to be extremely uncomfortable because your piercer's fingers are going to be all up in your nose. The pain you may feel may be minimal or non-existent, but it's going to be uncomfortable. Again, when done correctly, the piercing goes through skin and not the thick cartilage right here in the center of your nose. Typically, your piercer will use a clamp. Clamps are never fun, but for this piercing, they really are pretty necessary. I know sometimes people will freehand certain piercings and it works out. Septum piercing, I'm sure you probably could freehand it, especially if you've been doing it for a while, but for the most part, piercers will use a clamp. Kind of just holds it in place and helps line up since it is a little bit more difficult to see all the way to the tip top of your nose. And like other piercings, your piercer will use a hollow needle. The clamp is there to hold the spot in place as well as to guide the needle through correctly so that it doesn't get all kind of skewed or anything. Once the needle has gone through, the clamp will then be removed and you're stuck with this needle basically at the tip of your nose. It's quite funny. You're sitting there going like, I don't want to move because I don't want to hurt myself, but like this thing is pushing against my nostrils and it's a little uncomfortable. Once the clamp has been removed and the needle is still in there, at that point your piercer will then take the jewelry and feed it through with the needle. Usually your starter jewelry is going to be a curved barbell, or as a lot of people refer to it as a horseshoe. This is that one where it looks like a curved U shape, and this makes it easier if you need to flip it up. That's why a lot of people really like this piercing. The ability to hide it super easy. Something that you should expect when getting this piercing. Even if you don't experience pain, your eyes may still water. This is an incredibly sensitive area here at the tip of your nose. Have you ever accidentally plucked a nose hair or something like that and it makes your eyes water? It's pretty much like that. Your nose is incredibly sensitive. Anything that messes with it can either make your eyes water or you may even experience a sneeze. I know for me, I believe my right eye watered. Both eyes didn't water. For some reason, one of my eyes likes to water more than the other one. So speaking from personal experience, I had one eye water and then I sneezed with the needle still in. That wasn't fun. So that is something to expect. Even if you don't feel pain, you may still cry. Not because it hurt, but because that's the response from your body. You know, something's going on up in your nose, the response is for your eyes to water or sneeze. And if you sneeze, just try and don't do a really forceful one because I feel like that would hurt. Just keep in mind, it's gonna be less painful because it is going through thin skin, so it's gonna be less painful than a cartilage. But this is just a response for your body. You know, it sends signals to your brain that, oh, I may need to cry right now. Some blood for this area is also normal. Because it's not cartilage, there's a little bit more happening up here, you may experience some blood. Now, you can also experience blood with a cartilage piercing, not saying that, but do have that understanding that you may see some blood. I was one of those people that did. Now, moving on to pretty much the largest section of this comprehensive guide, and probably will be for any guide in the future. Healing and aftercare. This is a fun one. Healing for a septum piercing can take 2 to 3 months. That being said, it can take longer depending on a few factors. If you have had your piercing for 2 weeks and you suddenly say, wow, I feel like I can change it, your piercing is not healed. Ignore the fact that I changed mine after 3 weeks. I had extenuating circumstances. Always handle a piercing, whether it's new or old, with clean hands. If you're gonna mess with your piercing, wash your hands first, or at least put hand sanitizer on them. Make sure your hands are clean before you mess with any piercing. For a septum piercing, you are going to be using pretty much the standard aftercare of any other piercing. First thing that you'll be using is your salt solution. So this can either be a pre-made one like H2 Ocean or the NeilMed, or you can make it yourself. Do not overdo the cleaning. Twice a day is pretty much all you need, unless you're noticing like a bunch of crusties are building up, which it's kind of hard to notice up in your septum piercing. But if you feel like there just needs a little bit of extra cleaning, do not overdo it. Doing it once in the morning and once in the evening, pretty much all you need to do. Just make sure that you take the time to do it. But overdoing it can actually prolong the healing process. If you use a pre-made solution, you can usually just take like the nozzle of the bottle and either point it directly onto the piercing, or you can take something like a Q-tip, spray it down, and just kind of touch it up around there. Be careful with the Q-tip. I know a lot of people don't like them. I personally have never had problems with Q-tips, but sometimes little fuzzies get left behind and that can irritate a piercing. If you create your own solution, you must make sure that you are doing the correct measurements, otherwise it could irritate your piercing more. So the correct measurements are 1 cup of water, which is 8 ounces, at warm temperature, not boiling hot, but you don't want it cold or room temperature either, because it's not gonna really do anything if it's at that temperature. But like on the warmer side of room temperature, you're gonna want 8 ounces of water. Keep in mind that it should not be tap water. It should be something like distilled or bottled water. Do not use tap water. And with that water, you're gonna take 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt, non-iodized, and mix it in there. Do not do any more than 1/4 of a teaspoon. 1/8 is usually enough. If you do any more than 1/4, you're gonna irritate it. It's gonna be incredibly drying and abrasive to your piercing. Again, too much salt can irritate it and prolong the healing. When using your own mixture, what you can do is take a cup that you could easily put the tip of your nose into. So like if you've got a cup, you've got your solution in there, take your nose, put it in there and just hold it there for a few minutes. That way it kind of works around the piercing site, loosens up anything that may be there like gunk or crusties. It needs to be able to cover the piercing. Again, you don't need to sit there for 10 plus minutes. 5 minutes is all you need with it. Just sit there with your nose in the water. It's gonna be a little uncomfortable, but it's pretty effective. You can use a gentle cleanser, but it is not recommended to use it right away. So you should at least give your piercing a minimum of 2 weeks before you start going in with any kind of gentle soap to clean around it, your salt solution is pretty much all you're gonna need. Do not use things like rubbing alcohol, Neosporin, or Bactine, or anything along those lines. Alcohol products, so like rubbing alcohol, is incredibly drying. You do not want that for a brand new piercing. You don't want that for any piercing, but you really don't want it for a brand new one. Things like Neosporin and Bactine also prevent oxygen, so like necessary oxygen, from reaching the piercing site. You do not want this for an open wound. You want to treat a piercing like an open wound. You want it to be able to breathe. You want it to be able to heal. Do not cover it up with anything that would keep oxygen from getting in. With your septum piercing, you may experience swelling or even soreness. Try very hard to not accidentally bump your nose. Now you may be thinking, I don't bump my nose often, but have you ever like had an itchy nose and you just start rubbing it? You gotta cut that out, especially when it's brand new. It's not gonna be good. You will find that it is incredibly sensitive, even just a few months after you get it done. May not be, you know, super sensitive at 3 months as it was at like 3 weeks, but you will still find that it's a little sensitive and may hurt. Do not rotate your jewelry. I don't know why certain businesses like to say rotate your jewelry. Y'all know who I'm looking at. If you need to flip up your septum jewelry, something that I found, so speaking from personal experience, I found particularly helpful was, at the time I needed to flip it up for work. So what I would do is, as soon as I got to work, like still in my car, I would flip it up and it would stay up during the workday. Then as soon as I would leave work, I'd get back in the car, I'd flip it down, and I wouldn't touch it until the next day when I got back to work. So do not flip it up and down constantly, especially after you got it done. But if you find that you do need to flip it up for work, for school, for any other reason, try to limit it to like twice a day. So like once you can flip it up when you're at work or school or wherever, and then when you're done with whatever that activity is, you can flip it back down. Don't change your jewelry until it is time and it is healed. The only exception to this, and again, we're gonna ignore my circumstance that made me change it early. The only exception to this rule is if you find that the jewelry that is in there is irritating the piercing site. At that point, go back to your piercer and have them swap out the jewelry for a different like material or even just a different style of jewelry. Next section, jewelry sizing. What type of jewelry typically goes in a septum piercing? So usually septum piercings are pierced at 16 gauge, but they can be stretched larger or they can be downsized. Totally easy to do that because it isn't cartilage. It's that little thin fleshy area. It can actually be stretched, it can go down in size. Now keep in mind, it is still a tight space, so stretching it can be difficult, but you can do it. Diameter for jewelry kind of depends on the type of jewelry you want, as well as the size of the nose. Things like that go into determining the diameter. For me, I usually stick with 16 gauge, 5/16 of an inch segment rings in my septum, just because I like how close it hugs to the septum cartilage. I just like that close look, but a lot of people will go like a bigger diameter so that it hangs down a little bit more. You also may be into other kinds of jewelry other than a segment ring. Speaking of segment rings, what kind of jewelry can you put in a septum piercing? So obviously, septum clickers. The piercing name is in that jewelry piece. Septum clickers, that's probably one of the most popular options. Those are the ones where they're usually like a straight bar across and then they curve, and they usually have like really intricate details to them. They're really pretty. Then you have a segment ring, which is what mine is, and that's basically just a really tiny circle that has a hinge that opens and closes, makes it super easy to get in and out. You can also have the curved barbell, or horseshoe as some people refer to it, which is usually like starter jewelry. A lot of people like to stick with this because of the ability to flip it up and down easily. It's also a really great option. Captive bead rings. Not my particular favorite for any jewelry, just because I always struggle with captive bead rings, but this is also a good option. It essentially is a curved barbell with a jewelry piece that snaps into the middle and just offers a little bit something more detailed. You can also do seamless rings. These look really good, but they are kind of a pain to get in. Very similar to segment rings, but they don't have the hinge. They have more of a thing that you have to bend to get it in. Takes a little bit more effort, but it does look good and it looks seamless, much like the name suggests. And the final option that you may have are retainers. You can pretty much put a retainer in any piercing. Septums are no different. Keep in mind, retainers are usually glass or plastic. They're not going to be metals of any kind because that defeats the purpose of a retainer. Retainers are meant to make it seem like you don't have a piercing, but to hold that piercing open so that you don't lose it. So this was my kind of quick run through of what to expect, what you need to know, everything regarding septum piercings. Let me know in the comments below if this helped you in any way. I would love to continue to do more of these, whether it's about, other different kinds of piercings. I'd love to do more. If you have a septum piercing, sound off below. Was there anything that I left out? Cause really and truly, when you think about piercings, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot that goes into it, but there is. So I may have missed something, so sound off in the comments below. If you've been thinking about getting a septum piercing, also leave that in the comments below. What's holding you back on it. Let us know. Special thank you to my patrons. You can help support the channel on Patreon while having access to videos early, viewing patron-only content, and more. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big ol' thumbs up. Go on down there and hit that subscribe button, wherever it may be, because I don't know. Even though I do, this is just my shtick now. Also hit that notification bell in case you want to know when I upload, and in case YouTube wants to let you know when I upload, because I would really appreciate it. And until next time, bye guys.